I'm curious to hear, considering that you're in a band that have achieved pretty much anything at this stage, what was the creative thinking behind the motivation of creating this album? What did you want to achieve? Like how you just over your thinking process.
So it started with that we didn't want to make it.
Okay.
We didn't want to make this record. Basically, it started with the idea of that the previous record came out literally. We were on tour right before the pandemic. The last show, that tour was here in Sofia.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and it was huge. Sold out arena. I had no idea we had this many fans in Bulgaria at all.
I was there.
Everybody was singing the lyrics. it was incredible.
Yeah.
And just the whole vibe, and on every way, I saw that the Bulgarian flags. Then the family. We are kind of the modern day Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
Our fans follow us,
yeah,
right? Yeah. And I'm looking at the flags all over from Germany, Czech Republic, everybody, right? The most amazing was did you notice that there was an Israeli flag right next to an Iranian flag, and they were dancing together?
So amazing, yeah, that was so amazing.
So that's what this is about. When I saw that, I'm like, man, this is what music is about. And so so we were on a high of. This tour was amazing. The record just came out on the last day of the tour, right? And then a week later, shut down everything. So that record, F8, was kind of the victim of of this pandemic. Obviously, nobody focused on music; everyone was focusing on what was going on in the world, and so we were just kind of waiting. Mm-hmm. It's going to end in a couple of weeks, and then we go back on the road, and we can tour on the record, and then that turned into 3 months, and then 6 months, and a year. And so it was probably a year into the break when we started to talk about, okay, this can take much longer. This can be a bigger problem than we thought. And so that's how it came about. We don't want to wait too long between records. Let's start working on a new album. Mm-hmm. And so we went into the studio, and because we went in that way, I guess there was no pressure of any kind. There was no deadline of any kind because we were let's start recording, And also it was let's just record anything. We didn't have a concrete idea of what this record should be. Let's just record whatever we think it should be. And as we started to record, that's sort of that freedom of of no pressure of any kind, no deadline. The music started to come out wow, this is very different. Sounds like that punch, but it's very different, And in that progress, we actually realized that, what? This is our 9th record. At this point, everybody knows how we sound like. At least everybody in heavy metal, hard rock knows how we sound like. And we already proved ourselves, and there's nothing to prove. Our sound is ours, we can do anything. And then, actually, this record became more diverse than any other record we did before. And we had this conversation, if you look at bands like Queen, how would you categorize Queen? What is that?
Yeah.
But see, exactly, nobody can. But you know what that means? That's real freedom. Yeah. That is real freedom because Queen doesn't have to be anything but Queen.
And that's exactly what makes them Queen.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And so as we were recording this album, you don't compare ourselves because we don't sound like anything like Queen. Yeah. But the idea of we can be just 5-finger death punch, and it doesn't have to be anything else, right? Yeah. And so by halfway in the record, we were super excited because, just the craziest material was coming out, and it sounds like us, but it's what is this? Is it rock music still? Is it heavy metal? Is it,
Yeah.
And so I think we kind of achieved that,
Yeah.
It feels like we arrived to this place where it's just us. It's just music. I don't care what subcategory, what genre it falls into. That's freedom. That's real freedom. When you don't have any sort of boundaries where you have to fall into.
That's so well said. And I'm curious. Have you always had this sort of approach towards creating music? Because I imagine being such a huge band. I guess at some point you sort of feel responsibility or you're sort of just considering how people would perceive what you're creating. Would you say that you've at some point experienced limitations in terms of your creativity, just considering outer aspects, or you always had this sort of approach to concentrate on just expressing yourself and being
Right.
confident.
So responsibility becomes obvious, yes.
Yeah.
You know, actually, we were just before the interview, we
Yeah.
were talking about that. Like,
Yeah.
the internet is forever.
Yeah.
Whatever you say, it's out there
famous.
now, you know? So, you know, you are responsible for pretty much everything you've done and say, you know, and that's just the world today, right? 20 years ago, it wasn't like that, you know, and then the 80s when everybody was the big rock stars, right? They could do whatever, and you know, there's no record of that. you really threw that TV out of it, you know what I mean? So, you know, so there's definitely a responsibility comes with, you know, everything you do, but also with the music, yes. The bigger the band is, there is that, but creatively, I don't feel like it actually, you know, got in our way. That it's not the kind of, I do understand the responsibility, but I don't think it got into your way like, oh, we can't do this. So I never had the urge to do something that would be super irresponsible anyway, right?
Yeah.
But we do have a different method. I would say that the success of the band is, you know, obviously we can, you know, go online and read the stories and the crazy stuff, and everybody has their own idea how this happened, but and generally it's wrong.
Yeah.
Generally when I read stories, it's like, you know, it's not even close, you know what I mean? And so that's, but I think that's why people don't understand that it was very conscious how this was built, and there's a method to everything we do, and everything is nothing really by accident, you know. And so we have very specific ideas of how we create, and that is in the music. And if you're not familiar with the band, you just will know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I grew up in Europe, right? And so to me there's a very distinct. There's a difference between American, let's say, American music and European music. To me, American music is blues and rhythm based. So generally, it's about the grooves and how it makes you feel and the rhythm. We Europeans, even if you're not a fan of classical music, we are 100% influenced by classical music.
Yeah.
And I could probably whistle any piece and you know it.
Yeah.
You know the pieces. And you might not be able to name like, oh, that's Bartok, Beethoven, whoever, right? But you know the song.
Yeah.
So we are definitely influenced by European, you know, classical music. And classical music is pretty much about the harmonies and how they relate to each other, right? So that's the distinction between the two. That this is all feel, and this is all, you know, very musical, very almost mathematical in some way, right?
Yeah.
And so I always wanted to marry them too. So Five Finger Death Punch is kind of that, you know, I grew up here, and so we have those heavy grooves, but it's always there. Little melodies and little harmonies are always there, right? So that's always kind of leads the charge, but there's always this idea that the classical musicians have to write music and communicate complex ideas and feelings without vocals, right? Yeah. So how do you understand what Tchaikovsky wrote about? You kind of do though, right? Or you know, how do you know that, you know, that fourth season, which season is what? Yeah. You know, from Vivaldi. How do you know? You know, you feel it, right? So we approach songwriting from that perspective, that we write the songs first, and the song has to say something. It has to make me feel some way. And sometimes it's a primitive thing. Like, this song makes me feel like I'm going to trash this room. Yeah. That's the most primitive, aggressive thing it can be. Or it can be way more sophisticated. But the point is that we write the music first. Before we give it to the singer, Ivan, it has to be complete. And it has to have that feeling. Because now I accomplished what a classical songwriter should. I communicated something, some feeling. I'm changing you how you feel. And there are little tricks, like, for example, like play your guitar, and I'm going to put a drum beat on it that is a little bit behind, like a snare is a little bit late. That's going to create this, it's called the shuffle. It's going to create this feeling of like, oh, things are good, and, you know, you're feeling good. Yeah. Now, I'm going to same guitar riff, I'm going to put the snare right on the beat. Yeah. I feel like all militant and marching. Whoa. Yeah. And now I'm going to be a little bit faster. And you almost get anxiety because it's rushing. Yeah. Right? And these are almost like, you can barely hear the difference, but it changes how you feel. Right? And that's just a rhythm pattern. Now you start to play around with harmonies. When it's minor, when it's major, when it's dark, when it's light. And you start to put this together. That's how you write music. That's real songwriting. When you score a movie, if it's a wrong music, the movie is horrible.
Yeah,
right?
true.
So you have to catch that vibe. And so that's the whole method for us. Like, how do I catch this vibe? How do I give you something with just the music? How do I take you through different emotions? I can make you really anxious, let's say in the verses, and I'm going to relax you in the chorus. Right?
Yeah.
So that's what and now we give it to Ivan. And now he knows what we're doing because he can hear that. And sometimes he would ask me, like, okay, what's the vibe on this? What you were thinking when you wrote this? And I would tell him. He's like, okay. And then he goes and writes his stuff. So, and then somebody would listen to it and it's like, wow, this is a very simple song. Yeah, you think so.
Yeah.
You just don't, because you don't hear what's really happening there. See what I mean?
Yeah.
Like somebody who doesn't understand how this works would say, oh, that's a simple song. Yeah, you can think that. But no, a lot went into that. There are, exactly what snare, what went where. That was very thought out, And the magic of simple melodies, there are a set of melodies that are just so ancient that you react.
Yeah.
That there are certain pieces that's like, whoa, that's just gonna get you, and all of those melodies have both physiological but some kind of a psychological attitude or a psychological impact on you.
True.
Because let's say take Carmina Burana. Yeah. And you hear that da da da, right?
Yeah.
Or you go and then you have songwriters like Vangelis and people like that who cut those things and they incorporate it in their music, right?
Yeah.
You have to know all that to understand. So that's what I mean. Like it looks like it's a heavy metal band, but it's not. No, it's not that simple. We're not just laying bricks like, oh, here's another. You know what I mean? So the success of the band didn't come out of like we were just lucky. You don't get lucky 25 times. We have 25 top 10 hits.
Yeah.
You don't get lucky 25 times. It's just not how that works.
That's such an amazing answer. By the way, thank you for sharing this information because it's so fascinating to understand the process behind your creativity.